Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the UCLA Alumni Association Town Hall. I am your UCLA Alumni Association president, Dr. D'Artagnan Scorza, double Bruin, and I'm so grateful to be joining all of you here tonight. We are proud to welcome two very special guests with us who represent UCLA's values and needs in the state capitol. Both California State Senator Benjamin Allen, as well as California Assemblywoman Sydney Kamlager, are here joining us tonight. And I know you're going to enjoy a very delightful conversation with them. You know, we started these town hall series really to ensure that our UCLA community would be able to engage in conversations with our leadership, with our faculty, our staff, and each other to help understand the value and the benefit and the impact of the university upon Los Angeles, the state of California, the nation, and the world. So tonight we're joined by two very special people, two people I love and adore very much. You all will get to meet Ben Allen. And Senator Allen, who's going to provide some opening remarks here very shortly, represents the 26th district, including the West Side, Hollywood, as well as the coastal South Bay. He advocates for addressing systemic inadequacies in California by authoring laws including a focus on environmental protection and electoral reform. He's also been a key leader in supporting funding and improving opportunities for higher education in our state legislature. He was an attorney before he was elected to the Senate, actually went to Berkeley, I remember, because we were both on the Board of Regents at the time, and currently serves as a lecturer at the UCLA School of Law. His father, who's an amazing person as well, has served his entire career as a faculty member here at UCLA in the English department. He was the student regent between, I think, the 2007-2008 student regent, and was the past president of Santa Monica Malibu Unified School District Board of Education. Ben currently chairs the Senate's Environmental Quality Committee, the Legislative Jewish Caucus, the Legislature's Joint Committee on the Arts, the Senate Select Committee on Aerospace and Defense, as well as co-chairs the Legislature's Environmental Caucus. He has a BA in history from Harvard, attended the University of Cambridge and received a master's in Latin American Studies, and also attended again UC Berkeley to receive his JD. And for those of you, Ben, you can tell them about your international experience as well, I think, doing work around genocides in Africa at some point as well. So, folks, I'd like to welcome Senator Ben Allen to tonight's town hall, and I've asked him to provide a few opening remarks to talk about his current priorities and impact on UCLA.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. It's so great to see so many people join on to the call. And I just want to say major shout out to my good friend D'Artagnan, who I've known for many, many years now. And it's just so fantastic to see you continue to grow in all sorts of leadership roles. But D'Artagnan has been is a real example of what makes UCLA so special. And he has helped to make UCLA more special. I really, so I was the student regent in 2007, 2008, and the way that it works is that they have a regent designate and a regent, and so the regent designate then goes on to become the next regent. At the time, there were only, I guess there were now more students on, but at the time there were just the two of us. And Dart and I traveled all over the state. We visited every campus several times to the university, oftentimes driving late into the night to get on time to Merced for something, and then to get over to Santa Cruz for something else. And I really treasure our conversations, our time together, Dart, and our friendship. And it's been so fantastic to see you continue to complete your doctorate and now go on to your important leadership roles, in Inglewood, on the school board there, and obviously, at UCLA at the Alumni Association. So, I know your future continues to be very bright, and I just appreciate you a great deal. Obviously my good friend, Sydney Kamlager too. I want to just say how great it is to see you on this call. We were just on another call actually about trying to address the homelessness crisis in Los Angeles. So we've got a lot to talk about, but, very briefly, I am about as UCLA adjacent as you can get without actually having a degree from UCLA. I am a Californian because of UCLA. My dad, as you mentioned, got a job at UCLA coming out of grad school. And had never been west of the Mississippi. Neither had my mom. UCLA did not fly out their prospects at the time, or at least didn't fly him out, but they offered him a job. They said, if you want to come, come. If not, you're just going to have to look. There's no websites back then. So he just had to, look in a magazine or something to figure out what it looked like. So my parents decided to take a risk and have an adventure, come west. And the rest is history. He spent his whole career in LA on the campus in the English department. He actually was also a member of the Italian and comparative literature departments as well. And so it really had a phenomenal career at the university. My brother ended up getting his doctorate there. I met his wife, who got her master's, undergrad and master's there. My niece is now an undergraduate at UCLA. I've taught at UCLA in the law school, and I audited classes when I was much younger there. So anyway, I'm a huge fan, and I'm very disappointed with the football result from the weekend. I know. I don't even want to talk about. Yeah, in fact, Sydney's on the call, so we're not even going to talk about that. All right. So look, I'm so proud to represent UCLA in the state Senate, and Dart's absolutely right. I have continued to be a major proponent for the University of California and for UCLA in particular. The University of California has played such an important role in all of the successes that California has seen. If you look at our growth, at the fact that the extent to which we've become such a center for technology and for innovation, for entertainment, for the arts, for agriculture as well, so many of the things that have made California such a beacon for the whole world, they have their roots in the university and the investment that the state put into the university, into the research and development, into creating this institution that has become such an important vehicle for social uplift. The university, I think UCLA alone has more Pell Grant recipients than the entire Ivy League combined, and I think Berkeley can say the same. So it's a special institution, and one that we need to continue to fight for, and one that continues to be under attack for all sorts of strange reasons. So education, higher ed continues to be a major priority for me. Dart mentioned environment. I mentioned that we were just we're working really hard right now on homelessness and housing. I just want to bring up one issue that's really timely that I'm proud of, and that has to do with elections. We just coming out of an election. Our work to try to expand the vote, as other states have been making it more difficult to vote, as some people very high up in government have been trying to challenge those efforts to make it easier for people to vote. In California, we took a different path. We did the Voters' Choice Act a few years ago. It's a bill that I authored, and I'm proud of it. It basically expanded our voting infrastructure to get us to a place now where we were able to make sure that everybody got a vote by mail. But in addition, we had these vote centers that were open all over the county. You could vote in person if you wanted to, using either a drop box, using a mailbox, or going in to vote in person at a vote center. And you could go anywhere in the county. And the idea that this whole idea that we could only vote in one place, in one location during certain hours on one day, it was so antiquated and so antithetical to modern life. And we really wanted to create a brand new model. And as a result, we've seen sky high voter turnout. I was proud to see on the front page of the California section of today's LA Times, it talks about how our state's voter turnout is now the highest that it's been since 1952, when we were at a very different stage in life. So that's something I'm proud of. I will continue to look for these sorts of common sense solutions that really make government more accessible to people. Let me just mention that we really are working on trying to address the fallout from the COVID crisis, trying to rebuild a more equitable California that serves all of our communities coming out of this crisis. Part of that's going to involve rethinking our cities. How do we get around commute patterns, et cetera? We're looking at trying to expand aid for renters, for small businesses, focusing on a recovery of infrastructural development that will be more environmentally friendly, ensuring that our city infrastructure can withstand the threats of climate change. I think about, I went to Santa Monica High School, which has this beautiful Works Progress Administration theater. And I think about the vision that people like Franklin Roosevelt had back in the 30s to say, look, we have a crisis on our hands. This is a difficult time for America, but how are we going to rebuild from it? How are we going to emerge from it in a way that's going to actually leave a legacy that's going to be long-term? And he saw that putting investment in our schools, in our universities, in our transportation infrastructure was going to be a long-term thing that the future generations would thank him for. And I certainly, I have been a beneficiary of that. So many of us on this call have been a beneficiary of that vision. So I hope I hope that we will do things now emerging from this crisis that future generations will thank us for. Deepening our investment in public higher education, building out an infrastructure that's much more environmentally friendly, but that will also be very useful to future generations. And so that's our challenge today, as we also emerge from this economic crisis and try to make sure that we emerge in a more equitable way. And there's been disparities that have continued to grow. So those are some other things we have to grapple with as we enter into this next year. And Sydney's been a great partner in this effort. And I just want to say what a great friend you've been, Sydney. We've been working so hard together on developing equitable economic solutions and also environmentally friendly solutions to our current infrastructural crises. And so I look forward to your comments and our broader discussion.
Thank you so much, Senator Allen. Really appreciate your opening remarks and all of the work that you're doing in the state legislature and on behalf of us here at UCLA and all Californians. So folks, if you've just joined us tonight, you're with both myself, your Alumni Association President, D'Artagnan Scorza, as well as California State Senator Ben Allen and California Assemblywoman Sydney Kamlager. Sydney is a leader in her own right, and both she and I ran for office at the same time a little bit over 5 years ago when she was first elected to the LA Community College District Board of Trustees. And so Sydney and I have also done trainings together for the Frontline Leaders Academy, have worked together on multiple town halls in South LA focused on healthy food. She is a champion of the environment. She is well loved, and I think is a shining light and rising star in both California, but also a reflection of what Black Girl Magic can do for so many people in communities. And so Sydney represents the 54th Assembly District, which covers Baldwin Hills, Crenshaw Community, Culver City, Ladera Heights, Leimert Park, Mar Vista, Mid-City, and Westwood, right? She's an advocate, as I mentioned, for environmental justice, funding for the arts, and equity in our educational system. She's also been very passionate about criminal justice reform and poverty issues. They've all been central to her work in Los Angeles and Sacramento. Professionally, she's done quite a bit of amazing work in the nonprofit sector, in entertainment, education, and in government. As I mentioned, she was the previous president of the LA Community College District Board of Trustees, and she currently chairs the Select Committee on Incarcerated Women. She's a member on the Assembly Public Safety Committee, a member of Speaker Rendon's Select Committee on Police Reform, a member of Governor Newsom's Penal Code Revision Committee, and she's a self-proclaimed Brojan who attended USC, folks. She attended USC, but in a recent Facebook post to the UCLA class of 2020, shared pride in knowing many amazing UCLA students, faculty, staff, and alums. She received her BA in political science from USC, as well as a master's in management and public policy from Carnegie Mellon University. We have recruited Sydney to our UCLA family, so I hope you all continue to give her a warm welcome. Despite that loss last week, don't worry, Bruins, we're still on top. We are still the best. We're still the university that's the top choice, number one applied to in the country, so we don't have to worry about anything there. So Sydney, I'd like to go ahead and offer you an opportunity to provide some welcome remarks to our alumni family.
Well, thank you. Most amazing D'Artagnan Scorza, probably the number one, I want to get it right, Bruin alumni of forever and ever. You know, sometimes my head just says Trojan, so I wanted to make sure I said the right thing. And I was curious, I was wondering if the intro was going to go sideways, but we were in the good zone. We were in the good zone. I want to thank you for inviting me to this town hall. Yes, we were in the trenches together. We started this out 5 years ago, and yet we have not aged a bit. We look so great. But just a champion with Social Justice Learning Institute. And then I read that you're now going to the county to make a whole bunch of Black boy magic there with race and equity. So congratulations, your star just will never stop rising. And it's always good to be on having a discussion with the Rabbi Dr. Professor Allen, who is most amazing. I want to make sure that we have time for discussion, but yes, Ben and I actually were on this call right before this talking about housing and homelessness. We're both a part of the Los Angeles County delegation, which is a bicameral bipartisan group of members that have been talking for the past couple of years on issues that are relevant and important to this region of the state. Oftentimes we get pitted in these regional sort of oppositional dances with folks from the Central Valley or the Bay Area. And it's really important to remind ourselves that at the end of the day, we are on one team, the same team, which is the California team. But it's also important to recognize that there are some unique characteristics of Southern California that do deserve to be elevated, especially as we have continued to find fault with the investment levels for our infrastructure, which include our public education system. So we've been involved in really, really robust discussions. We had a policy retreat, I think a couple of weeks ago. We had some great presenters talking to us really about how to make the business case for investing in our social systems. And now with COVID, you know, challenges with housing and homelessness, challenges with our social safety net services, challenges with our public education systems. I mean, we've seen it from K through 12 and to post-secondary and higher ed, you know, challenges with transportation, challenges with water. You know, we have an opportunity to really decide, you know, if we're going to let all of these things kind of continue to be dismantled or crumble, or what kind of value are we going to place on their importance and then invest. But we talked about how to actually make the business case for investing in these social services. And we know with the California Master Plan and the priority around making sure that our education systems were free and accessible, which included our CSU and our UC systems. I mean, that was actually the thing that made the Golden State golden. That was why folks wanted to come here. That's why folks wanted to stay. That is sort of where we were tapping into for innovation and creativity, our UC system. And so we can't forget about it. And if we don't decide to recommit, we run the risk of allowing the inequities and the disparities that we are now seeing grow. And what we do know is that inequality is really corrosive to sustainable economies. And we have an opportunity to kind of embrace the fact that we have an obligation to make sure that we are investing in the economies that are driving, you know, Southern California, LA County, the state, recognizing how important the role that public education plays into it. So one of the things we learned is that for this kind of success, right, for a way to create sustainable economies and sustainable investment in the rising tide of all boats, is that you need good data. And we know that we get so much of our data from our UC schools. I mean, just with COVID and how predictive modeling on the spread of COVID, on the rush for the vaccine, on discussions around sort of herd immunity and what we should be doing, many of those discussions started in the medical centers and in the halls of our medical centers and our UC systems, right? So the importance that data around equity really plays in how we move forward. Then we also learned that deliberation is key. How do we set an expansive table with all kinds of stakeholders who really have a commitment to creating a durable society and are either practitioners in the field or experts in the field or just have a stake in what can be decided? How do we create a table that's expansive enough for all of them? And we also know that many of our stakeholders, our researchers, our academics, our students, our advocates, you know, our folks that have come out of or are part of the legacy of our UC system. I'm trying to bring everything back to the UCs, okay? I am, as a Trojan, I am doing my darndest. And then the third thing is, when you have the data and you have the deliberation, how do you meld those together to create a regional destiny? And if we are going to talk about the regional destiny that is Southern California, the regional destiny that is Los Angeles, I don't think we can really talk about our destiny without making sure that we're including UCLA. I mean, our UC systems will include Irvine and Riverside in those, but the commitment that we must once again make to our public education system, to the master plan, because we know all of the wonderful things that come out of it. I mean, it's our alumni like you and so many others who've come out, who've made amazing things happen on behalf of the state and our country. So I'm excited that I have an opportunity to represent UCLA. I was excited actually about the weekend's football game, but we won't go into that. But I'm always excited when I hear from our chancellors to say, hey, don't forget about us. If it's deferred maintenance, if it's supporting faculty, if it's making sure that we're able to get these competitive grants, if it's making sure that we're able to play on a global level when it comes to being competitive and getting our fair share of all of the pies. I mean, we have a huge stake at the table in this system. And so I'm just happy to be able to represent and pursue the obligation that we know the state needs to make as it relates to UCLA and all of the other schools in our system. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Assemblywoman Kamlager. I really appreciate the work that you've done and the work that you continue to do on behalf of UCLA and, again, all Californians. And so you actually said something that I think I'd like to get into related to the role of the pandemic in the economy. And folks, before I ask that question, if you have questions, and we are taking your questions tonight, please be sure to email them to jsina, that's JSINA, at support.ucla.edu. And if you're joining us, I am D'Artagnan Scorza, here with California State Senator Ben Allen and California Assemblywoman Cindy Kamlager. So we're going to go ahead and jump right back into our questions. So for both of you, and either of you can take it in whatever order you like, UCLA has been, one of the economic engines here for Los Angeles, but also for the state. So what role do you see UCLA playing in the recovery of the state and even here in our county?
Okay. Well, I mean, look, I think so many things, right? I mean, first of all, it has to do with what Sydney was talking about, producing data, studying our society, helping decision makers in the private sector and the public sector create solutions to speed up the recovery, make sure that it is more that our recovery is more equitable and more effective. The health system. I mean, let's start there. I mean, our UCLA health system is just a critical piece of the Los Angeles infrastructure that's helping, those, everything from helping those who've fallen ill, right the way over to the difficult work of rolling out the COVID vaccine. It's going to be it's going to play a really important role. It's got the refrigerators and the capacity and the scope and the size to really play a critical role in the vaccine distribution. And it's a trusted institution. I think people kind of know that UCLA is an institution they can trust. I also will say that we've got so many innovative ideas that are generated out of UCLA on the business side, on the technological side. Our science and engineering folks, the arts and culture that come out in and out of UCLA will also play an important role in helping Los Angeles get back on its feet. We're a city of arts and culture, and we're also an area that knows that artists are, in some respects, the most important second responders, right? While the firefighters and the medical practitioners can go in there and save our lives, the artists help us rebuild our souls coming out of this crisis and help communities heal in some of the more intangible ways that we know will need to happen coming out. That we saw artists, the very same role that we saw artists play in the aftermath of some of the terrible fires up north, or even in Santa Barbara as well. So there's so many ways that UCLA is going to play a role, and it's one of the many reasons why I'm just so glad that it's in my community.
Thank you so much for that, Ben. Sydney?
I was just going to add, outside of the obvious, right? The research that's happening and the innovation and the trials. I think there's an opportunity for, how to engage the alumni, right? This huge diverse pool of, experts probably in so many fields and in so many sectors who care about the system, who care about the school, and who care about the mission and the agenda of the school, and probably are living it and breathing it in their work every day. I think there's an important role that can be played looking at UCLA as a connective tissue between our K through 12 and then what happens after folks graduate, because what we have seen is really a fractured public education system with our little ones. And so you recognize that you might not be at the front of the pipeline, but you're towards the end of the pipeline, and there is a responsibility to make sure that you are either redesigning or shoring up that pipeline so that you can get quality, diverse, engaged students that will continue to want to, move into your system. And the other thing I think that's really important is, I think the schools can play a large role in how we sort of rethink facilities use. COVID has really sort of turned how we educate and how we are educated inside out. And so while we're working to make sure that we're sort of containing spread so that folks feel comfortable enough to go back to schools to learn or to go back to schools to work, I think there's also an opportunity to learn from the schools about how we should be teaching and what those hybridized models look like. And how do we sort of, how else can these facilities be used? Because one of the great things about UCLA is it is a huge sort of property manager. And when we're looking at urban planning and sort of city redesign, what role can the schools play in sort of moving us into the future in a way that makes sense and is responsive to both pandemics, but also to cures?
Yep.
Thank you both so much. I think those are really phenomenal answers, and I really appreciate you laying that out for us in our alumni community. Now, this is, I'm going to start asking you some questions that are related to really how the state can also support UCLA. And so, like all communities, our community has been hard hit by the pandemic, right? I think at some point we were losing around $5 million a day. And we know that the state has been working hard to shore up the economy here in California, but there was also some additional tax revenues that were unanticipated that recently come in. So, what do you all think the budget might look like, and what should our alumni community and our UCLA community perhaps expect from the state as it relates to the budget in the coming cycle?
Well, we kind of got through a portion of the year with this huge deficit. And then we got the news not too long ago that we had $26 billion in unanticipated revenues. But we also know that we ended last year's budget session with $14 billion in trigger cuts that were going to happen if we didn't get money from the feds. And then that money didn't come. And so my suspicion is that a portion of the $26 billion that we now have is going to go to sort of backfill those trigger cuts. I'm also assuming that, Governor Newsom is going to be leaning hard and heavy on his relationship with Speaker Pelosi so that we can try to squeeze out as many federal dollars as possible. I was disheartened. I think Ben and I were in the same meeting when we were talking to UCLA, and they said, the money we got out of the stimulus package actually paid for like one full week of operations for the school. Mind-boggling. So we cannot do this without support from the federal government. The state, I think, is going to have to play a role. I mean, subsidies are real, and you can call it whatever you want, but we are going to have to shore up some of these systems if we want them to, because it's just the grease that you need for the wheel to keep it moving so that it doesn't stop and you don't have atrophy. Another thing, and I don't necessarily know the role that the state can play in this, but I think there will be discussions, is sports. We know that for some of the schools, especially like UCLA, so much money is generated through sports revenue, and how has that been compromised because of COVID? And we know that money goes back into the system. Just like we know so much money comes in from, competitive grants for research. So I think it's looking at the pots of money, the revenue streams that schools are able to generate on their own to see where they have been constricted and constrained, and the kind of support that the state can use, the leverage that we have as this giant. And then also, how do we sort of re-engage with new partners at the federal level to make sure that we're getting the fair share that we didn't have?
Thank you so much.
I think Sydney gave a very, very complete answer.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you for that, Sydney. So, we're going to move on now to this previous election cycle. There were a lot of propositions on the ballot. Obviously, we had a presidential election, and Vice President-elect and Senator Harris was elected here in the state of California. So there's a lot that's going on right now in California's politics, from the governor needing to select a new attorney general, to selecting a state senator to replace and backfill Senator Harris's seat, as well as really the impact of the loss of Proposition 16, right? Which has in many ways decimated contracting for many communities of color and opportunities for small businesses. So can you all speak to really, your perspective on the recent failure of Prop 16, as well as some of these other issues that may affect our university community?
Do you want to? Okay.
How do you want to do
it? Either one of you.
Oh, I was just going to say, I was talking to, I think, a UCLA admissions person. We were not talking specifically about Prop 16, but we were talking about the consequences of Prop 209 and what it's had, and the consequences that we've seen as a result. And he said, everyone's thinking about, that if because of affirmative action, that means my child won't be able to, won't get admitted. And he said, it's not about finding all of the same kinds of students. We don't want this one great, amazing, like uber overly qualified student, and then we're trying to replicate that person. He said, it's almost like casting for a movie. Everyone's thinking about, Nicole Kidman or the celebrity actor, but it's not necessarily about that person. It's about the entire cast. And what does the cast need to look like to tell the story? And he said, our student population is the cast that tells the story of the school and sets the stage for its future. And there's so many different voices in a cast, right? Sizes and lengths of dialogue and intrigue. And that's the diversity that you're looking for. And I thought that was a really great sort of, analogy, because when we were talking about Prop 209 and its effects and Prop 16, it's like, well, that means that my child won't get it, and and we have to kind of think about the story that we're trying to tell, right? The story of a student population. It's also really important to note that, we've been doing some of these things for a very long time in different kinds of ways, because it has been about making sure that we have diverse populations. I was disheartened that it didn't pass. I mean, there's so many folks that have lost out as a result of the fact that Prop 16 failed at the ballot. Women, especially white women, suffer more than any other group in terms of losing out on contracts. I think as a result of Prop 209, only 2% of procurements actually go to women, to white women who own small businesses. We obviously have challenges with folks of color, with veteran populations as well. And so it will just mean that schools will have to continue to be innovative and creative in terms of how they are doing what they do to make sure that you have classes that are as representative as the communities that you're trying to serve.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Ben?
Yeah, no, I mean, in UCLA, I once again, a very complete answer by Sydney. I will add, UCLA, the UC has worked hard ever since Prop 209 passed. There was a huge drop in Latino and Black students, elite. I know, especially in some of the law schools. Over the years, the admissions offices have really worked to claw that back through looking more holistically at admissions, and have been relatively successful at that. But obviously, it's going to continue to be, an important thing for the schools to focus on. It is so interesting to look at these results. I mean, I know that Prop 16 struggled with communities and in neighborhoods that one might not have expected it to struggle with, and there were a lot of folks in the Latino community, for example, who seemed to be pretty lukewarm on the measure, even though almost certainly the Latino community would have benefited, pretty a lot through the passage of Prop 16, or at least some individuals from the community. So there was an interesting kind of disconnect, I think, in the public perception of what this was all about. I kind of grew up coming up in the 90s. And so affirmative action was such a hot issue. We were all talking about it. And it was something I knew really well. But I think maybe for some of the folks in the younger generation, maybe at least some were not as kind of attuned to the kind of conversation that we were having back then. And, from my perspective, I think there were a lot of voters who appeared to view academic meritocracy through rose-colored glasses. This idea that all things are equal, and all you got to do is plug people into a number scheme based on their test scores and other things. And of course, not really taking into account the sheer amount of structural and systemic barriers that disadvantaged communities have to face to be competitive in the application process for universities or contracts or anything else. And so there's an education aspect to this as well that is tricky. I mean, this election result, there's so many strange results from this election, including in California. Obviously, Joe Biden won, 2-to-1 margin against Donald Trump. You saw, but the Democrats in the House lost 3 seats in California. The California state Democrats gained 2 seats in the Senate, the state Senate in California. You had, 5 major, the Democratic Party had 5 major losses at the state level. Prop 16 is one of them, but also rent control and, the dialysis thing. And there was the split roll measure. There was a couple others as well.
Bail reform.
Bail reform is another one. The Uber Lyft thing. So there was a number of these measures. But then, of course, your colleague Sydney, Assemblymember Cooper's attempt to roll back some of the criminal justice reforms that failed at the ballot. So that was a progressive win. The DA race. There was a fascinating city council race in our backyard between Nithya Raman and David Rue. So there was so many different mixed results, and it's really hard to draw some firm conclusions from these results. But it just continues to remind us all that voters are not a monolith, that they have complex feelings about lots of different issues, and they can oftentimes hold very competing views that end up manifesting themselves with very different kinds of votes. And that's something we all have to remember. We can't just sort of say, "Oh, California's progressive, so they're gonna sign on to everything." We got to figure out with every individual measure that we're talking to voters about, how do we tailor it? How do we tailor our messaging in a way that's going to resonate to them, in a way that's going to resonate to them in a way that's very timely to them now, and also that takes into account the very different opinions and perspectives that continue to arise, that may be different than ones that were held back in the past. And so that's the constant challenge that we have as political communicators, to be honest.
Fantastic. Well, thank you both for those comments. So we're going to go to audience questions, and I want to make sure that we have an opportunity for the audience to actually hear from you about their questions. But we're going to try and do a rapid fire round because we do have a special guest for you all tonight. And if you do have any additional questions, I want to make sure that you're able to get them over to Julie Sina at jsina, JSINA, at support.ucla.edu. So these questions are going to be really brief. We're going to ask for brief answers, and I'm going to try and get through as many of them as possible. Sounds good?
Yes. I hope the special guest isn't like the wrapped up Trojan or something.
Okay, well.
Yeah. That would be good, actually.
That would be great. I should have had a video just rolling and on fire.
That would be bad.
All right. Well, no, I think you all are going to enjoy our special guest. So thank you very much for that. So, quickly, we're speaking to a lot of alums, and they want to know, right? So what are the legislative priorities that our UCLA alumni community can get behind with both of you?
Climate. Recycling.
Thank you.
Yeah, climate, recycling, waste management, and then of course supporting our UC in the budget as it tries to emerge from this crisis. And then we are working. I mean, Sydney mentioned this. We've got some really exciting and innovative ideas generating right now amongst our Los Angeles County delegation on addressing homelessness and housing.
Well, speak to that, Ben. So one of the questions from the audience, and you all have, by the way, been answering a number of these audience questions, so thank you for your comments, is how we can begin to engage our legislative leaders and the UCLA community to both use its research, but also its resources to deal with homelessness and concentrated disadvantage.
That's a great question. So we're always interested in ideas. Sydney is the chair of our LA delegation, and she hosted this awesome thing called the Bear Cave. And And it was like the Shark Tank, except it was the idea was we had all sorts of thinkers and nonprofits and different folks come before us and present their ideas, and then we use them as a springboard to try to create a legislative package for our Los Angeles County delegation. And we had speakers from the Anderson School, we've had various professors from UCLA in the past who've come to speak to us as well. So that's one thing. Your ideas are always very important to us. We're always looking for innovative ways to come up with solutions to these great societal problems that we have. And then, of course, we need your help in advocacy. There are a lot of members, we have alums all over the state, smart people. We need people who are paying attention to the legislature. There's so much attention that's either local or obviously the 24-hour news cycle is so focused on Washington. Everyone wants to talk about Congress and the latest Trump tweet. But the fact is there's so much stuff of import happening at the state level right now. The state government is powerful. It's got resources, not enough, but it's got some serious resources. And we govern a state that is on its own would be the 5th largest economy in the world. And there's a lot of low-hanging fruit, especially in the area of the environment, these strong Democratic majorities. And yet we've been able to do so little, from my perspective, in terms of bold work in the areas of climate or pollution, plastics, waste management. And the same goes for a number of other issue areas. And so we need advocates who are paying attention to the legislature, who are holding legislators accountable, who are calling in and building relationships. Get to know your local legislator, consider applying to be on their staff, support them, criticize them, help them, praise them, whatever it takes to get them to start to make sure that they're taking their constituents seriously. Sydney and I happen to represent very engaged constituencies, but some of our colleagues, I think, really skate by, to be honest, with knowing that their constituents are not paying as much attention. And as a result, they end up really becoming very beholden to the special interests and lobbyists that dominate the halls of the Capitol. And I think it's bad for our democracy, and we need citizens who are engaged in paying close attention.
It's also important to kind of look at the breadth of the depth and the breadth of the UCLA alumni. I think most people think, oh, call us because UCLA is in our district. But I think it would be amazing for our colleagues to see the hundreds or the thousands of UCLA alumni who care about the school, who live in their district or who have businesses in their district, so that they don't just think that it's an SD 26 or an AB 54, an AD 54 issue. UCLA is a statewide issue.
Fantastic. Thank you for that from both of you. And that actually sort of gets into a specific question that folk in our audience have, which is about dealing with homelessness in the UCLA area, specifically at the Westwood Recreation Center. So I don't know how familiar you are with these issues, and we don't have to get into it, but can you maybe more generally speak about how your work is helping to actually address homelessness in a very local way?
I'll let Ben kind of continue on what our previous meeting was about, but there have been a number of bills. There was a budget bill, I think, this year that put money in the budget for homeless students to make sure that they didn't lose out on their financial aid because they were all of a sudden housing insecure. We've done safe parking, which, I think is a good temporary fix, but isn't, we should not be saying it's okay to live in parking lots. But safe parking, the safe parking lots bill for both, I think, schools, community colleges included, and churches. And then we have been working on we put $800 million in the budget for Project Home Key, I think $500 million for Project Home Key, making sure that we were putting more money into the hands of local jurisdictions for their homelessness prevention. Now here we're moving into tiny homes. And then, as Ben mentioned, the LA group has been working specifically on housing and homelessness issues as we get ready for 2021.
Awesome. So our special guest will be joining us in just about 2 minutes. I want to see if we can get some quick questions in before he does. So folk are asking, do you both support a public banking initiative?
Yes.
We in fact, we passed a bill on a public bank that was signed, and I like to see it expand. I mean, I think it's a really great way for us to finance certain types of big solutions that the private sector sometimes struggles to get into. And I think sometimes if public bank is willing to put up a certain amount of capital, then that brings in resources from the private sector. And so there's a virtuous cycle that can be started by having a strong public bank.
I will add that the bill that got passed and signed last year or the year before was mostly a infrastructure bank bill. It wasn't a public bank. It doesn't allow for individual accounts. It doesn't allow for cannabis dollars. It doesn't allow for support for folks who are traditionally unbanked. And so that, in my mind, is a true public banking bill.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you both of
you do the bill, Sydney?
Huh?
You gonna do the bill?
Maybe, why not?
All of our public banking folk, if you want to help work on that bill,
call
talk to
me.
Assemblywoman Kamlager. All right, folks. So here's the deal. I told you we have a special guest, and we've been getting your questions in. I want to thank you all so much for joining us again tonight. At this time, we'd like to go ahead and welcome our special guest tonight. He is joining us at this very moment. Come on in.
I'm getting nervous.
I know. I'm like, is it Alex Trebek?
Well, he's in our UCLA community. So
I think he's like the Bruin. He's the. All
right. There we go. JP Santos has joined us tonight. So I know Sydney and Ben, I'm sure you're like, who are you bringing right now? JP is our Graduate Student Association president. I want to thank JP for joining us tonight. He is a fifth-year Ph.D. electrical engineering student and has started a partnership with us here in the Alumni Association that focuses on graduate student mentorship programs for graduate students. JP, can you take a couple of minutes to introduce yourself and tell us about this amazing program that you've helped sponsor for our alumni community?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. And again, good evening, everyone. My name is JP Santos. I'm finishing my doctorate in electrical engineering. So hopefully I'm defending my dissertation this spring. And I'm this year's graduate and professional student our student body president. And so one of the things that we're really focusing on, even last year when I was the external vice president for GSA, is really this idea of mentorship. And not many people necessarily know, but for example, for those of us that do research, a lot of the way we progress through our academic tenure is really dependent on our academic advisor. So your professor is pretty much, in charge of when you graduate, how you progress, which research journals get published, or pretty much what your professional development looks like. And your resources are really dependent upon also the knowledge of your advisor. And I know one of the biggest things there is that, obviously that also leaves a lot of room for abuse because, a lot of things actually happen behind closed doors in labs, such as, for example, even sexual harassment happens that are not necessarily reported because there's a huge power differential between the advisor and the student. And so if, for example, if your advisor is a specialist in like neurological, some very specific thing, and there's only 10 experts worldwide that deal with this specific topic, well, if you report your professor, that might eliminate some of your future career paths. And so one of the things I actually approached the Alumni Association last year was that, is there a way that we can create a pathway for graduate and professional students to be able to reach out to former alums to at least be able to glean wisdom and knowledge in how they navigated UCLA's graduate and professional space. And so I partnered immediately with Julie and Gloria from the Alumni Association because I realized that obviously our alumni who have graduated from UCLA have already developed the knowledge and the skill set to not only successfully navigate through UCLA, but even figured out some resources that help retain them at UCLA. And so we started this program with the Alumni Association in partnership with the Graduate Student Association. And I think that it's been really, really helpful. And I know, for example, for a lot of the graduate students I've heard from, they've really appreciated this because it really provided them a different perspective especially from what they're used to from their graduate academic advisors.
Awesome. Thank you so much, JP. And I want to say and give you major kudos for the hard work you've done. I've actually signed up. I am a mentor of a graduate student. As you know, I'm also a lecturer there in the Fielding School of Public Health. And so I've been really excited to be in that conversation and to see, and I've already met with my graduate student twice since the launch of the program. So great work. And that was just what, 2 weeks ago, I think we just had the meeting. So it's really having an impact, and I see the need is huge. Just quickly before we wrap up, what do you want to do after grad school? You know, are you trying to go work for Assemblywoman or Senator here?
You know, I would not be opposed to a political career, but I'm currently sponsored right now by the Navy in my research, and so I'm actually working at the Naval Air Warfare Center in Weapons in Point Mugu, which is by Oxnard and Ventura.
Yep.
So I'll be working there for a couple of years, but let's see what happens after that. And I think I've told you before, I'm also a lecturer at Santa Monica College. So
yeah, that's right. Well, I will tell you, JP, as both a Bruin and a sailor, I'll say go Navy, and you're in good company. So thank you so much for your hard work. So listen, folks, I want to thank Assemblywoman Sydney Kamlager for joining us tonight, and Senator Ben Allen. I want to let you know that our special guest in January is going to be Martin Jarman, the new athletic director for UCLA's program. We want to make sure that you're able to join us. Assemblywoman and Senator, any final or closing remarks for our alumni community here tonight?
I just want to say thank you. And, you know, one of my most recent hires is Neda Ashtari, who is the the vice president for GSA. So I am right here with you, JP.
All right. Thank you. Senator?
Well, yeah, just appreciate everybody. And I will say, I mean, UCLA and the University of California need your help. I think that in the past, well, first of all, there's always been an assumption that the state's going to take care of the university. And to some extent, the state does, but the state is a political beast. And the legislature and the governor's office, I mean, all of us are constantly subject to pressures. And it's really important. I just can't emphasize enough how important it is for UC alums who care about this institution, who understand what an important role it has played and must play in the future as an innovator, and also as a place to advance a fundamental and important social justice agenda, a place that will educate the best and brightest and open up doors for future generations. People who understand the value of the university have to keep banging the drum about ringing the bell and banging the drum about how important this institution is. You hold your legislators accountable. Make sure that we're electing people who care about this university and about this institution and advocate for this university and this institution. We got to keep that pressure up. There are lots and lots of different interests who are constantly trying to, get their piece of the pie, and it's important that the UC be central to that conversation. That only happens if our alumni organize and advocate.
What I will say, Senator Allen, we have a phenomenal alumni advocacy team working with our UCLA government and community relations partners, and we will take you up on some of those offers to coordinate, and Assemblyman will take you up some of those offers to sponsor legislation on behalf of UCLA and our alumni community. Folks, I want to thank you so much for joining us tonight. I want to thank JP for joining us as our special guest, and thank him for his hard work. You heard him, you heard where he's going, but he might be coming your way someday.
He's wearing the right colors. He's wearing the right colors.
He's wearing the right colors.
That's right. That's right. Not USC colors. Good job, JP. So we want to thank you again for joining us tonight. Remember, Martin Jarman is going to be joining us in January. I want to thank the Assemblywoman, thank the Senator, thank our GSA President, and wish you all a wonderful evening. Go Bruins.
Dart, yeah.
Thank you, Dart.
Thank you, Dart.
Thank you all.